Most people would rip this plant out and call it a weed. Big mistake. It gives you tender greens first, gluten-free seeds later, and enough plant protein to make it feel like one of the best garden bargains Americans forgot. While tiny bags of ancient grains sell for premium prices, this plant can grow from cheap seeds in heat, rough soil, raised beds, or big patio pots. Before you spend another $100 on supplements, watch this video to find out what it is and how to grow it yourself. Section 1. The weed. Hiding in plain sight. The plant is called Amaranth. And here's the thing. It has a strange reputation in America. Some people see it growing near a fence line and think, that's just a weed. Others only know it as a tiny overpriced bag in the gluten-free aisle at Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. And some gardeners have seen those deep red or purple varieties and assumed it was just an ornamental plant. Pretty in the backyard, but not really food. But that's the mistake. Amaranth is not just a weed. It is not just an ancient grain. And it is definitely not just a garnish. It is a two-in-one food crop. Tender greens early in the season, protein-rich seeds later on. And that's why it's such a bargain for home growers. This plant gives you leaves and seeds. It handles summer heat better than many cool-season greens. It can grow in rough soil where fussier vegetables struggle, and some varieties look good enough to belong in a raised bed, edible landscape, or patio container. You could keep paying premium prices for tiny bags of ancient grains, or you could grow the plant yourself and harvest both greens and seeds. Store-bought is a recurring cost. Garden-grown becomes a living asset. Use the young leaves like cooked spinach, in soups, stir-fries, or sautéed greens. Use the seeds in porridge, bowls, popped grain, or flour blends. But to understand why this plant matters, we have to go back long before health food stores ever existed. Section 2. Before grocery stores, this plant fed civilizations. Before supermarkets, before Costco, before protein labels and emergency food buckets, people had a much simpler question about a plant. Does it keep families alive? Most Americans know corn, beans, and squash as important indigenous crops. But what most people don't realize is that amaranth was also a major part of the food history of the Americas. It was not some tiny side crop growing in the background. Historical records describe amaranth as one of the major food crops in Mesoamerica, standing beside corn and beans in importance. And honestly, that makes sense when you look at what the plant can do. It can handle heat. It can survive dry conditions. It can grow in soil that is far from perfect. The leaves can be eaten before the seeds are mature, and then later, the same plant can produce thousands of tiny seeds. Today, people spend more money trying to make their diet resilient. Protein bars, organic grains, emergency food storage, all of it. But ancient people chose crops by a simpler standard. Can this plant actually feed us? The Aztecs called it huautli. The Inca knew it as kiwicha. In the Himalayas, it became ramdana. In the Caribbean, the leaves live on in dishes like callaloo. Different cultures, different names, same discovery. And for American gardeners today, that matters. In the Southwest, it makes sense for heat. In the Midwest and South, it fits summer gardens. In urban spaces, it can grow in large containers. On a homestead, it belongs in a food security bed. And once you understand how useful it was, the nutrition starts to make a lot more sense. Section 3. The complete protein angle. Now, in America, protein is almost its own industry. People buy protein powder at Costco, protein bars at gas stations, Greek yogurt by the case, beef, chicken meal prep, plant-based protein shakes, and honestly, a lot of that makes sense. Protein matters. But here's where amaranth gets interesting. It is not just another carb pretending to be healthy. Amaranth is known for containing all 9 essential amino acids, which makes it stand out among many plant-based grains. That means this little seed is doing something most garden crops do not. A tomato gives you flavor. Lettuce gives you freshness. Herbs give you aroma, but amaranth gives you edible leaves, minerals, calories, and a protein-rich seed from the same plant. And this is where the money part really hits. You might spend $100 on protein powder at Costco, a few bags of organic grains, and maybe a green supplement. But for that same $100, you could walk into Home Depot, Lowe's, or a local nursery and buy seeds, soil, compost, and containers to start growing food that keeps producing. One is consumption. The other is capacity. Ancient people didn't need a nutrition label to know this plant mattered. They saw it in harvests, energy, survival, and full stomachs. Modern science is just giving names to what they already noticed: amino acid balance, mineral density, and protein quality. You can cook amaranth into breakfast porridge, mix it with oatmeal, add it to soups, pop it as a topping, or blend it into flour. But amaranth isn't just about the seeds, and this is where gardeners get an even better deal. Section 4. The greens are the hidden bonus. But here's the part a lot of people miss. Amaranth is not only a grain crop. Most American gardeners already know spinach, kale, Swiss chard, and collard greens. They're great until summer gets serious. Spinach bolts. Some greens turn bitter. Others slow down right when your garden is getting the most sun. Amaranth is different. Amaranth leaves are edible and commonly used as cooked greens in many food traditions. The young leaves can be harvested early, while the plant keeps growing toward seed production later. That means you are not waiting all season for one harvest. A bag of organic greens can disappear in 2 salads, but a few amaranth plants in a sunny corner can keep giving you leaves before they ever give you seed. And this isn't a new health hack. In the Caribbean, amaranth leaves live on in dishes like callaloo, real food, cooked in real kitchens for generations. Use the leaves in soups, sauté them with garlic, add them to rice bowls, omelets, or beans and greens. So at this point, the question becomes obvious. If this plant is so useful, why isn't it everywhere? Section 5. Why it wasn't just food. And here's where the story turns. In America, we understand that food is not always just calories. Thanksgiving dinner is not just calories. Bread and wine in church are not just calories. A grandmother's recipe is not just calories. Indigenous food traditions are not just ingredients. They carry memory, identity, and belonging. For the Aztecs, amaranth was not just a crop. It was sacred food. Spanish colonial accounts recorded amaranth's role in Aztec religious ceremonies, which made the plant politically and spiritually threatening after conquest. That changes everything. Because if a plant is only food, removing it creates hunger. But if a plant is food, ritual, memory, and identity all at once, removing it becomes a way to erase a culture. And when a food becomes part of identity, losing it costs more than money. This is why amaranth mattered in so many places. The Aztecs used it in ceremony. The Inca knew it as kiwicha. In the Himalayas, it was ramdana. In the Caribbean, the leaves became callaloo. Different cultures did not just eat this plant, they gave it meaning. Science can explain why amaranth is nutritious, but culture explains why people protected it for so long. And that meaning is exactly what made the plant dangerous to the people trying to control the culture around it. Section 6. The ban, and why the knowledge disappeared. Most foods disappear because people stop liking them. Amaranth disappeared for a darker reason. It was not pushed aside because it tasted bad. It was not forgotten because it was hard to grow. And it definitely was not lacking nutrition. After the Spanish conquest, colonial authorities targeted amaranth cultivation and ritual use because it was tied to indigenous religious practice. So the conflict was never just about a crop, it was food versus power, seed versus empire, memory versus control, nutrition versus erasure. And the most valuable thing taken was not just the harvest, it was the knowledge of how to use the plant. But here's the part that stayed alive quietly. In remote communities, families kept seeds. They grew small patches. They passed the plant down the way people pass down something precious when the outside world has decided it should disappear. The seed survived because ordinary people protected it. So when modern science later rediscovered amaranth, the truth is it had never fully vanished. It had only vanished from mainstream attention. Today, you can buy amaranth seeds online from seed catalogs, local nurseries, or garden centers. No one is banning it now. But most people still don't know what it is, and here's the strange part. Even after the ban faded, amaranth still didn't really come back. Section 7. The modern food system buried it again. And honestly, this might be the most familiar part of the story. America's food system is built around a small group of crops and products: corn, wheat, soy, rice, beef, chicken, and packaged foods that can move through giant supply chains. And today, you don't need to ban a plant to make it disappear. You just leave it without subsidies, processing infrastructure, shelf space, marketing, or a national supply chain. Modern agriculture tends to favor crops that are easy to standardize, harvest, process, ship, and sell at massive scale. Amaranth is incredibly useful in a garden, but awkward for the industrial system. The seeds are tiny. The plant can mature unevenly. It needs different handling. And it never got the same commodity machine behind it that corn, wheat, and soy received. That's why corn syrup can show up in half the grocery store, while amaranth sits in a tiny, expensive bag in the health food aisle. The system didn't choose what was most nutritious. It chose what was easiest to scale. But outside the mainstream, people kept using it. In Mexico, the Andes, the Himalayas, the Caribbean, and food traditions across Africa and Asia. Science may call it an underutilized crop. A gardener can call it something simpler, useful. A backyard doesn't need a national supply chain. A raised bed doesn't need a subsidy. A patio container doesn't need permission from the grocery industry. And that brings us to the part that actually matters for you. This plant is not hard to bring back. Section 8. Why it makes sense for American gardeners. And this is where amaranth becomes more than a health food story. Because right now, a lot of Americans are dealing with higher grocery prices, hotter summers, water concerns, and this growing desire to have at least some control over their own food. Backyard gardens, raised beds, patio containers, small homesteads, they all make more sense than they did a few years ago. Amaranth fits that moment almost perfectly. Amaranth is widely grown as a warm season annual, which makes it accessible for many U.S. gardeners after the danger of frost has passed. It starts easily from seed. It loves sun. It handles heat. It does not need perfect soil. You can harvest leaves early, then let the plant keep growing for seed. And honestly, a $4 seed packet can turn into dozens of plants. A supplement bottle runs out. A plant that drops seed can come back. That is the difference between buying health and building capacity. Full sun, warm weather, decent drainage, and enough space. That's the basic idea. But the real win is not just that you can grow it. It's what growing it changes in the way you think about food. Section 9. The real reason. This plant feels so powerful now. And this is why amaranth feels so different now. Modern Americans are constantly pushed into buying health. Supplements, superfoods, organic greens, protein products, powders, bars, capsules, and one more solution in a plastic tub. But amaranth changes the question. Instead of asking, "What should I buy next?" it asks, "What can I grow?" The science explains the nutrition, but the garden explains the independence. This plant carries health value, food security value, low-cost gardening value, and cultural value all at once. You could keep spending money every month trying to patch your diet with products. Or you could spend once on seeds, soil, and a container and start building a living source of food right outside your door. That is recurring consumption versus living production. And that is why this story does not end in the past. It ends in an ordinary American backyard. Amaranth didn't disappear because it failed. It disappeared because people forgot its power. But the seed survived, and now you can grow it back. So tell me, would you grow amaranth for the greens, the grain, or the history? Subscribe for more forgotten plants you can grow at home.